My name is Delia. I'm 34 years old, and I was standing in my childhood home's kitchen when my brother's fiancée grabbed my wrist. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin as she stared at me with wide eyes. "Wait," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're the Delia Morrison, the one who created—" Before she could finish, my mother's sharp voice cut through the air. "Don't encourage her delusions, Stephanie. Delia's nothing but a failure who can't even hold a real job." Before I continue this story, I want to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's ever felt invisible in your own family? If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how sometimes the biggest successes come from the places people least expect. Trust me, what happens next will show you why family isn't always who shares your blood, but who sees your worth when you're still becoming. Let me take you back to where this all really began. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and I'd driven 3 hours to my parents' house in Connecticut, my stomach already in knots. The Morrison family tradition was to gather the day before to prep for the big meal, though I'd learned years ago that family tradition really meant another opportunity for everyone to highlight my failures. As I pulled into the driveway of the colonial house where I'd grown up, I saw my sister Claire's Mercedes and my brother Brandon's BMW already parked there. Of course they'd arrived first. They always did everything first and better. The moment I walked through the door, the familiar scent of my mother's apple pie mixed with the tension that always hung in the air when I was around. "Oh, Delia finally made it," my mother Helen called out from the kitchen, managing to make my on-time arrival sound late. She emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, her teacher's posture still perfect, even after 5 years of retirement. "We were starting to wonder if you'd forgotten how to get here." My father, Robert, looked up from his newspaper, briefly giving me that weak smile that never quite reached his eyes before returning to his reading. After 30 years as a bank manager, he'd perfected the art of being present, but not involved. My grandmother Ruth was the only one who stood up to greet me properly, pulling me into a warm hug that smelled like lavender and cinnamon. "There's my girl," she whispered, and I held on a second longer than necessary. The kitchen was already a battlefield of preparation, with Claire commanding one counter in her designer sweater and perfectly styled hair, every movement precise like she was performing surgery instead of chopping vegetables. Brandon stood by the stove, stirring something, his sleeves rolled up just enough to show his expensive watch. They both glanced at me with those looks I knew too well, the ones that said, "Here comes the family disappointment." "Everyone, I have an announcement," Brandon said, setting down his spoon with a flourish. His face broke into that winning smile that had charmed every teacher, every employer, every person he'd ever met. "Stephanie and I are officially engaged." He held up his phone to show a photo of a stunning Asian woman wearing a diamond that probably cost more than I'd made in... Well, they didn't actually know what I made, but that didn't stop them from assuming it was nothing. The kitchen erupted in congratulations. Claire immediately started examining the ring in the photo, with her surgeon's eye estimating carats and clarity. Mother clasped her hands together like she'd won the lottery. "Oh, Brandon, she's lovely. And her family, the Chens, they're quite successful, aren't they? Her father's in tech. Tech entrepreneur," Brandon corrected proudly. "And her mother's a fashion designer. Stephanie herself is an executive at Nordstrom, heading their digital innovation department." He shot me a look. "She's very successful, very driven." The subtext wasn't subtle. Claire picked up the thread immediately. "Speaking of success," she said, not even pretending to make a smooth transition, "I have some news, too. I've been promoted to chief of surgery at Presbyterian. Youngest in the hospital's history." She paused, letting that sink in before adding, "It's been quite the year. Just last week I had to attend a medical conference in Boston, and when colleagues asked about my family, I told them about Brandon's engagement and..." She trailed off, looking at me with false sympathy. "I just said you were between jobs, Delia. I thought that sounded better than... well, whatever it is you're doing these days." "I'm not between jobs," I said quietly, but my voice was drowned out by my mother's response. "That was thoughtful of you, Claire," Mother said, then turned to me with that disappointed teacher look she'd perfected over 40 years in education. Delia, since you're here, I'll need help with the Thanksgiving preparations. Claire's making her famous cranberry sauce. Brandon and Stephanie will handle the appetizers when she arrives tomorrow. She looked me up and down. I'll have you fold the napkins. It's simple enough that you can't mess it up. Oh, and maybe arrange the place cards. At least try not to embarrass us in front of the Chens tomorrow. This is important to your brother. I nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say. The words I'd tried to say so many times before. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. In the quiet of the small powder room, I pulled out my phone and checked my notifications. A banner alert from my bank made me smile. Another six-figure payment had been processed. Below it, an email from my business manager about an expansion opportunity in Europe. The numbers were staggering, life-changing, but here in my childhood home, I was still just Delia, the failure Delia who couldn't hold a real job. Delia who folded napkins because she couldn't be trusted with anything important. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, at the woman who'd built something from nothing, who'd been featured in tech journals under a pseudonym, who'd changed an entire industry. Then I tucked my phone away and went back to the kitchen where my family continued planning the feast, never once asking what I might contribute beyond folded napkins. They'd made up their minds about me long ago, and I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong immediately. It's succeeding so quietly that when the truth comes out, they can't claim any credit for it. Thanksgiving Day arrived with the kind of crisp November weather that made Connecticut look like a postcard. I'd spent the night in my childhood bedroom surrounded by participation trophies and remnants of the daughter my parents had hoped I'd become. By 8 in the morning, I was back in the kitchen arranging napkins into elaborate fans while my mother orchestrated the meal preparation like a general commanding troops. Claire had already been up for an hour, her cranberry sauce simmering perfectly while she regaled us with stories about her latest surgical triumph. The Chens were due to arrive at noon, and the house buzzed with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for visiting royalty. "Remember," my mother said for the 10th time, "the Chens are very successful people. We want to make a good impression." She shot me a meaningful look. All of us. When the doorbell rang at exactly 12, Brandon practically sprinted to answer it. Stephanie Chen was even more beautiful in person than in photos, with sleek black hair and an effortless elegance that made her simple cashmere dress look like haute couture. Her parents followed her father in a perfectly tailored suit that screamed understated wealth, her mother in an outfit that was clearly one of her own designs. Behind them was a younger man who had to be Stephanie's brother Lucas, wearing jeans and a blazer with that Silicon Valley casual confidence. "Welcome, welcome." My mother gushed, ushering them in with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for the school board members she used to schmooze. "We're so delighted to finally meet you all. Brandon has told us such wonderful things." The introductions were a careful dance of social positioning. Mr. Chen spoke about his latest venture in artificial intelligence. Mrs. Chen mentioned her upcoming show at Fashion Week. Lucas, it turned out, had just secured funding for his third startup. My family responded with their own achievements, creating a tennis match of success stories where I was conspicuously left out of the volleys. "Let me show you around the house," my mother offered, leading them on the tour she'd perfected over the years. She stopped at the wall of family photos in the hallway, pointing out Brandon's MBA graduation, his promotion celebrations, various awards. She lingered on Claire's medical school graduation, her white coat ceremony, the newspaper clipping about her research publication. The Chens made appropriately impressed noises. "And this one?" Mrs. Chen asked, pointing to an old photo of the three of us as children where I was holding a science fair trophy. My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that's Delia. She's here today, too." She moved quickly past as if my childhood achievement was somehow embarrassing now. "Let me show you the living room. We had it completely renovated last year." I escaped to the terrace, needing air and distance from the suffocating performance inside. The November air bit at my cheeks, but it was better than the warmth inside that somehow left me cold. I was checking my phone, responding to an urgent message from my development team about a server issue when I heard footsteps behind me. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude," Stephanie said, joining me at the railing. I just needed a break from the tour. I smiled, recognizing a fellow escapee. It can be a bit much. She studied me with intelligent eyes. You're the sister Brandon doesn't talk about much. It wasn't a question. I'm curious what you do. Everyone in there has given me their resume except you. I work in tech, I said simply. Digital platforms. Her eyes lit up with genuine interest. Really? What kind of platforms? I'm always looking for innovative solutions for retail. We're trying to revolutionize how fashion brands connect with consumers, but the traditional systems are so limiting. There's this one platform that's been making waves, completely anonymous founder, but it's brilliant. It's changing how we think about direct-to-consumer relationships and… Stephanie! Brandon's voice called from inside. Come back in, we're about to open the wine. She gave me an apologetic look. We'll have to continue this later, she said, but as she walked away, she kept glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Dinner was served at 2, the dining room table groaning under the weight of tradition and expectation. My mother had outdone herself, every dish perfectly prepared and presented. The seating arrangement was telling. I was placed at the far end, almost an afterthought, while the Chens were clustered around Brandon and my parents like they were already family. As the wine flowed and conversation bubbled, Mr. Chen turned to me with polite interest. So Delia, what is it that you do? I opened my mouth to answer, finally ready to share even a small piece of my truth, but Brandon cut in smoothly. Delia's between ventures right now, he said with that patronizing big brother tone. She's still finding her path. Claire laughed, the sound sharp as a scalpel. That's one way to put it. Delia's tried everything. Remember the blog, Delia, what was it called, Style Something? That lasted about 3 months. Then there was the YouTube channel that never took off. Oh, and that online store that crashed and burned. What was that, your 5th failed startup? 6th, Brandon corrected with a smirk. Don't forget the app she was going to build. We're still hopeful she'll find something stable someday, my mother added with a sigh that suggested she'd given up that hope long ago. Not everyone can be as focused as Brandon and Claire. Some people just take longer to find their way. I felt Lucas's eyes on me from across the table, noticed how he was looking at my phone next to my plate, where notifications kept lighting up the screen. But before he could say anything, my father raised his glass for the first of many toasts, and the moment passed. The rest of dinner was a blur of conversation that flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream present, but not really part of the current. Stephanie kept trying to catch my eye, and Lucas seemed increasingly interested in the constant buzzing of my phone, but my family had erected their usual wall of dismissive commentary that made real conversation impossible. They'd decided who I was years ago, and no amount of success could change a story they'd already written. I arrived at my parents' house early Thanksgiving morning, determined to help, despite yesterday's humiliation. The kitchen was already a symphony of clanging pots and sizzling pans, my mother conducting with the precision of someone who'd hosted this meal for 30 years. I'd barely set down my bag when I heard her on the phone in the next room, her voice carrying clearly through the thin wall. Yes, Patricia, all 3 children are here, she was saying to my aunt. Brandon just got engaged to a lovely girl from a very successful family. Claire's now chief of surgery, can you believe it, 38, and already running a department. There was a pause. Oh, Delia, she's here too, still trying to find herself. At least 2 of my children are successful. We can't have everything, can we? I stood frozen in the doorway, each word a familiar knife between my ribs. Grandmother Ruth appeared beside me, her hand gentle on my arm. Don't listen to her, sweetheart, she whispered. She's always been too blind to see what's right in front of her. I threw myself into preparation, volunteering for every task that would keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. By mid-morning, I'd completed 200 napkin fans, each folded with the kind of precision I usually reserved for code debugging. I'd arranged them on the sideboard in the dining room, a small army of white linen perfection, when Claire breezed in carrying a glass of red wine, despite it being barely 11 o'clock. Oh, these look nice, she said, running her finger along the display. Very, Crafty. The condescension in her voice was thick as honey. She set her wineglass down on the sideboard, gesturing broadly as she launched into a story about her latest surgical triumph. So there I was, scrubbed in for this incredibly complex procedure, and the visiting surgeon from Johns Hopkins said, the glass tipped. Time slowed as I watched the burgundy liquid arc through the air, splashing across my carefully folded napkins like blood on snow. The white linen immediately soaked through red, spreading in ugly blotches that destroyed hours of work in seconds. Oh no! Claire gasped, but her surprise seemed rehearsed. Delia, why did you put them so close to the edge? You know how clumsy I can be when I'm excited. She turned as our mother rushed in, drawn by the commotion. I'm so sorry, Mom. I knocked over my wine. Delia placed the napkins right where I was standing. My mother surveyed the damage, her lips pursing into that thin line I knew too well. For heaven's sake, Delia, the Chens will be here in an hour. You'll have to redo all of them. And this time, use common sense about where you put them. She handed me a roll of paper towels. Clean this up first. Quickly. As I mopped up Claire's wine, I heard Brandon in the foyer greeting early arrivals. My hands moved automatically, cleaning, refolding, trying to salvage what I could while my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I ignored it, focused on the mindless task of creating perfection from ruined linen, until a shadow fell across my work. That's an interesting app you have open there. Lucas Chen said quietly, nodding toward my phone, which had slipped partly out of my pocket, the screen visible. Those analytics look familiar. Real-time user data, geographic distribution, revenue tracking. Pretty sophisticated for someone who's between ventures. I quickly tucked the phone away, but his eyes remained curious. I work with a lot of platforms, he continued. That dashboard looked like enterprise-level stuff. The kind of metrics you only see when you're dealing with millions of users. Lucas. Brandon's voice boomed from the doorway. There you are. Come on, I want to show you my home office. I've got this new 3-monitor setup that's perfect for trading. He shot me a dismissive look. Delia's always pretending to be busy with her little projects. She likes to feel important. Last year, she told us she was building some kind of fashion app. Never amounted to anything, of course. Lucas followed Brandon out, but not before giving me one last speculative look. I returned to my napkins, refolding with mechanical precision while my phone continued its insistent buzzing. Each notification was a reminder of the life I'd built outside these walls, the success my family couldn't see because they'd stopped looking years ago. By the time dinner was served, I'd rebuilt my napkin. Army arranged the place cards with calligraphic precision and helped serve the first course without dropping anything or otherwise embarrassing the family. The dining room was packed now, both families plus assorted relatives who'd made the pilgrimage for my mother's famous turkey. I was seated between Cousin Jeffrey, who sold insurance, and Great Aunt Mabel, who was hard of hearing, while Stephanie and her family held court at the center of the table. The meal progressed with the usual rhythms, compliments on the food, updates on various accomplishments, careful navigation of political topics. Then my father stood tapping his wine glass with his fork. The room fell silent. It's tradition in the Morrison family. He began in his banker's measured tone, for each of us to share what we're thankful for and our biggest achievement this year. It helps us remember how blessed we are. He smiled at Brandon. Son, why don't you start? Brandon stood with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Well, obviously I'm thankful for Stephanie saying yes. He raised his glass to her, and she smiled back. As for achievements, I was promoted to Senior Vice President at Goldman Sachs, youngest in the division's history. I closed 3 major deals worth over $200 million combined, and of course convincing this amazing woman to marry me. The table erupted in applause. Claire was next, smoothing her dress as she stood. I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve others through medicine. This year I was not only appointed Chief of Surgery, but I also published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine on innovative laparoscopic techniques. The technique I developed has reduced recovery time by 40%. More applause, my mother beaming with pride. The tradition continued around the table. Cousin Jeffrey had sold $1 million in policies. Uncle Stuart had retired with full benefits. Aunt Patricia's daughter had gotten into Harvard Law. Each achievement was met with appreciation and congratulations, the family's currency of worth on full display. Finally, all eyes turned to me. I started to stand ready to share even a fraction of my truth when my mother's voice cut through the expectant silence. "Let's just skip to dessert, shall we? I made 3 kinds of pie." She was already half out of her chair, motioning for others to help clear the table. "Delia, could you start bringing in the plates?" The dismissal was so casual, so complete that for a moment I couldn't move. Around me, family members were already following my mother's lead conversations, resuming as if I'd never existed at all. Only Stephanie remained still, her face flushed with something that looked like anger. Her parents exchanged glances. Lucas was staring at my mother with undisguised shock. And Grandmother Ruth, dear Grandmother Ruth, had tears in her eyes. I stood slowly with as much dignity as I could muster and began collecting empty plates. My hands were steady, though inside I was fracturing years of these small deaths, adding up to something that felt finally irreversibly broken. As I walked to the kitchen, arms full of dirty dishes, I heard Stephanie's voice behind me, sharp and clear. "Excuse me, but I think Delia was about to speak. Don't we want to hear what she's thankful for?" My mother's laugh was light dismissive. "Oh, Stephanie, you're sweet, but Delia's not much for public speaking. She's better with simpler things. Now, who wants pumpkin and who wants apple?" The dessert course was underway, conversations flowing as freely as the wine, when Stephanie suddenly slammed her fork down on her plate. The sharp clink of silver on china cut through the chatter like a blade. Every head turned toward her as she stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I can't do this anymore," she announced, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. "I cannot sit here and watch this for another second." Her dark eyes swept the table, landing on each Morrison family member in turn. "Do you people have any idea who you're treating like garbage? Do you have even the slightest clue who's been serving you dessert and folding your napkins? Or The room fell into stunned silence. Brandon reached for her hand, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Stephanie, honey, what's wrong? Sit down, please." She yanked her hand away. "What's wrong, Brandon? Your family has spent 2 days systematically destroying your sister, and you want to know what's wrong?" She turned to my mother, who sat frozen with a forkful of pie halfway to her mouth. "Mrs. Morrison, you just skipped over your daughter like she doesn't exist. Like she hasn't accomplished anything worth mentioning. Well, I have news for you, Stephanie," I said quietly. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "Because clearly no one in this family has been paying attention. Delia Morrison is the founder of StyleSphere." The name hung in the air for a moment before the reactions began. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. Brandon's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Claire's surgical hands trembled slightly. But it was the Chen's reactions that were most dramatic. Mr. Chen nearly choked on his coffee. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with recognition. And Lucas actually laughed out loud, a sound of pure delight and vindication. "I'm sorry," my mother said faintly. StyleSphere. What is that supposed to mean? Stephanie's laugh was incredulous. What is StyleSphere? Only the most revolutionary platform in fashion retail from the last 5 years. The platform that connects independent designers directly with consumers, cutting out traditional retail middlemen. The platform that major fashion houses use anonymously to test market trends. The platform that's valued at over $50 million as of last quarter. "That's impossible," Claire said, her voice sharp with denial. "If Delia had built something like that, we would know. She would have told us." Lucas stood up, then his excitement palpable. "Oh my God, it makes perfect sense now. The analytics I saw on your phone. That was the StyleSphere backend, wasn't it?" He turned to the table at large. "Do you people understand what this means? I've been trying to get a meeting with the StyleSphere founder for over a year. Every tech conference, every innovation summit, people talk about the genius who built this platform from scratch. The founder who's remained completely anonymous, who's turned down every interview, every speaking engagement. He gestured toward me. And you've had her folding napkins. You've had one of the most innovative minds in fashion tech folding napkins and arranging place cards. My family's denial came in waves. My mother shook her head repeatedly as if she could shake away the truth. No, this is some kind of misunderstanding. Delia would have told us. She wouldn't have kept something like this secret. Wouldn't she? Grandmother Ruth spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the denials. When exactly would she have told you? When you were calling her a failure? When you were skipping over her at family toasts? When you were telling your sister on the phone that only 2 of your children were successful? Brandon's face had gone from red to white. This is obviously some kind of joke. Delia's lying to impress Stephanie's family. She's always been jealous of our success, and now she's making up stories. I can prove it, Lucas said, pulling out his phone. The StyleSphere founder goes by DM in all the official documentation. Delia Morrison. He showed his screen to the table. Here's the incorporation filing. Here's the patent registry. 27 patents under DM, all related to innovative e-commerce solutions. Claire wasn't giving up. Anyone could fake those documents. This is just another one of Delia's fantasies. Remember when she said she was starting a blog? Remember the YouTube channel that went nowhere? This is just more of the same, except now she's convinced outsiders to play along. The room erupted in arguments, family members talking over each other, some defending their disbelief, others starting to waver. Through it all, I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, watching my family implode over news that I'd tried to share with them countless times before. Finally, I stood. The movement was small, but it commanded attention. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and opened the StyleSphere app. But instead of the consumer-facing version, I logged into the administrator backend. The dashboard bloomed across the screen, real-time data flowing like a river of success. Active users, 3.2 million. Daily transactions, 847,000 $. Revenue for the current quarter, $18.7 million. I navigated to the founder's verification page where my name sat clearly at the top, along with my encrypted biometric data that served as ultimate proof of identity. Then I switched to my banking app, showing the business account tied to StyleSphere Inc. The balance was staggering, more money than my parents had seen in their lifetime of careful saving. Still think I'm lying? I asked quietly, holding the phone up for anyone who wanted to look closer. For the first time in my life, my family had nothing to say. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Brandon stared at the phone screen as if it might bite him. Claire's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. I tried to tell you. I continued, my voice steady, despite the years of pain pressing against my throat. 3 years ago, when I said I was working on a fashion platform, you laughed and called it playing dress-up online. 2 years ago, when I mentioned I'd gotten funding, you said I was probably being scammed. Last year, when I tried to explain that major retailers were using my technology, you told me to stop making things up to feel important. 6 months ago, when I bought my house in San Francisco, you assumed I was renting a studio with roommates. You never asked. You never listened. You had decided who I was, and nothing I said could change that story. Mrs. Chen broke the silence, her designer's eye appreciating something beyond the numbers. The anonymous founder's strategy was brilliant, she said softly. Building credibility through the product itself rather than personality. Very few people have the confidence to succeed without recognition, or the pain of a family who wouldn't recognize success if it was sitting at their table. Stephanie added, her voice still sharp with anger. My mother finally found her voice, and with it came the beginning of a transformation I'd seen too many times in my professional life, the moment when people realize you have something they want. Her entire demeanor shifted, harsh lines softening into something that was supposed to look like maternal pride, but came off as calculating hunger. Delia, sweetheart. She began, reaching across the table toward me. Why didn't you tell us we're your family? We could have helped you. We could have supported you. The rewriting of history had begun. The transformation was swift and shameless. My mother's face rearranged itself into an expression of wounded maternal devotion, tears actually forming in her eyes as she continued reaching for me across the table. "My brilliant daughter," she cooed, her voice dripping with newly discovered affection. "Of course, I always knew you were special. I told everyone at church just last week how proud I was of your determination." Grandmother Ruth snorted. "Helen, I was there last week. You told them Delia was unemployed and living off credit cards." My mother's tears dried instantly. "Mother, you must have misheard. I would never." She turned back to me, calculating. "Darling, think of all the connections we could have made for you. Your father knows people from the bank. Brandon has contacts at Goldman Sachs. We're a family. We should be working together." Brandon had recovered from his shock and was already shifting into business mode, his banker instincts overriding his bruised ego. "This is actually perfect timing," he said, loosening his tie as if preparing for a pitch meeting. "I've been thinking about leaving Goldman anyway. The corporate culture is stifling. StyleSphere needs experienced financial leadership as it scales. I could come in as CFO, help you prepare for an IPO. Family businesses are always strongest when they keep leadership close." Flapped for family business. I repeated the words, tasting bitter. "Since when is my company a family business?" "Don't be selfish, Delia." Claire interjected, her surgeon's arrogance intact despite the revelation. "We all contributed to your success in our own ways. Growing up with accomplished siblings pushed you to achieve. And now that you have achieved something, it's only right that you help elevate the family. I've been thinking about medical entrepreneurship myself. StyleSphere could expand into wellness wear, smart fabrics for patient monitoring. I could head up that division." Around the table, the transformation spread like a virus. Cousin Jeffrey suddenly remembered how he'd always believed in me. Aunt Patricia mentioned how she'd told her book club I was destined for greatness. Uncle Stuart offered to review my contracts pro bono despite being a tax attorney with no experience in corporate law. Everyone had a memory to share of when they'd supported me, encouraged me, seen my potential. "This is unbelievable," Lucas muttered, shaking his head. "It's like watching vultures descend." My mother stood abruptly, motioning for me to follow her. "Delia, sweetheart, let's talk privately for a moment. Just mother and daughter." Her grip on my arm was firm as she led me into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. The moment we were alone, her mask slipped. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" She hissed, her carefully styled hair trembling with rage. "I told everyone at church you were unemployed. I told the neighbors you were having a quarter-life crisis. I told your father's colleagues you were finding yourself. Do you know how foolish you've made me look?" "I made you look foolish." I couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped. "You chose to tell those lies. I tried to tell you the truth." "Don't get smart with me, young lady. You owe this family. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. Now it's time to pay that back." She straightened her apron with sharp, angry movements. "Brandon needs a new position. He's too talented to waste at Goldman Sachs. You'll bring him in as CFO. Claire can oversee any medical expansions. And of course your father and I will need positions as board advisors. Paid positions, naturally." "Naturally," I echoed. "Family comes first." She continued, not catching my sarcasm. "Blood is blood. You can't turn your back on us now that you've made something of yourself. What would people say? What people say seems to be all you care about." Her hand slammed on the counter, making the dishes rattle. "You selfish, ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we've made, and this is how you repay us, by sneaking around building your little company in secret, making us all look like fools. My little company." The words were so familiar, so dismissive, that I almost laughed. Even now, even knowing what I've built, you can't help but diminish it. "Don't be dramatic. You'll do what's right for this family, or you're no daughter of mine." The ultimatum hung between us like a blade. Through the kitchen door, I could hear the dining room buzzing with excited conversation. My relatives already spending money, they assumed I'd share planning positions. They assumed I'd create rewriting history to give themselves credit for success they'd tried to prevent. We returned to find the table in chaos. Brandon was sketching out an organizational chart on a napkin, inserting himself at the top alongside me. Claire was Googling medical wearables market size on her phone. My aunts and uncles were debating which of their children should get internships. Only the Chens sat apart from the frenzy, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I need some air," Stephanie announced, standing again. She looked at Brandon with something like pity. "I need to think about things." "I'll come with you," her mother said quickly. Her father and Lucas followed, leaving the Morrison family to their feeding frenzy. That's when Grandmother Ruth stood, her 5-foot frame commanding more authority than anyone else in the room. "You should all be ashamed," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her 83 years. "Every last one of you. I've watched you tear this girl down for years. Mock her, dismiss her, ignore her. And now you sit here planning how to profit from her success." "Mother, you don't understand business," my mother began. "I understand plenty," Ruth shot back. "I understand that Delia came to each of you over the years trying to share her excitement, her progress, her achievements, and you laughed at her, called her a dreamer, a failure, said she was wasting her time on another silly project." She turned to me, her eyes soft. "I also know she begged you to listen, begged you to take her seriously. She sent you links to articles about her platform that you never clicked. She tried to explain her technology that you called playing on the computer. She even offered to show you the user testimonials that you said were probably fake." "That's not true," Brandon protested. "If we'd known it was real..." "It was always real," I said quietly. "Every project you mocked, every attempt you dismissed, the blog you laughed at. It was market research. I had over 100,000 subscribers studying fashion buying patterns, the YouTube channel that went nowhere. It was user behavior analysis that helped me design the interface, the online store that crashed and burned. That was my beta test. 200 users who gave me feedback that shaped the entire platform. Everything you called a failure was a stepping stone to something bigger. But you couldn't see it because you'd already decided I was worthless. We were just trying to motivate you," my father said, finally speaking up. "Sometimes children need tough love to succeed." "Tough love." Stephanie had returned, standing in the doorway with her family behind her. "Is that what you call systematically destroying someone's confidence? Is that what you call skipping over her achievements while praising everyone else? Is that what you call telling people she's unemployed when she's running a multi-million-dollar company?" She walked to Brandon, pulling off her engagement ring with deliberate precision. "I can't do this. I can't marry into a family that treats success as a zero-sum game where one person's achievement is seen as a threat to everyone else's importance. I've watched you for 2 days, and what I've seen makes me sick." "Stephanie, please," Brandon pleaded. "This isn't about us. We don't have to be like them." "But you are like them," she said sadly. "You sat there while they humiliated your sister. You joined in the mockery. You never once defended her or asked her about her work. You're so focused on being the golden child that you can't stand the idea that your failure sister might have surpassed you." She placed the ring on the table. "I won't raise children in a family where love is conditional on achievement, where support only comes after success is proven, where family members compete instead of celebrate." "What happens when our kids don't meet your mother's standards? What happens when they want to pursue something your family doesn't understand?" The room erupted. Brandon lunged toward Stephanie, begging her to reconsider. My mother shrieked about ruined holidays and family embarrassment. Claire tried to mediate with clinical detachment. Relatives chose sides, voices rising, accusations flying. And through it all, they found a way to make it my fault. "You did this!" Brandon rounded on me, his face twisted with rage. "You couldn't stand that I was getting married, that I was happy, so you had to ruin it with your drama. Your sister sitting quietly while being insulted is hardly drama," Mr. Chen observed coolly. "She's always been jealous. Claire added, her professional composure cracking. Always trying to compete with us to prove she's special. And now she's destroyed Brandon's engagement just to make a point. Classic Delia, my mother spat. Always making everything about herself. Look what your selfishness has done to this family. The accusations hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. I stood slowly feeling the weight of 34 years of this treatment, 34 years of being the family scapegoat, 34 years of love that came with terms and conditions I could never quite meet. But before I could speak, Grandmother Ruth's cane slammed against the floor with a crack that silenced the room. "Enough!" she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived through real hardship. I have held my tongue for too long, watched this family tear itself apart with jealousy and pride for too many years. But I will not stand by while you blame Delia for your own ugliness being exposed. She moved to stand beside me, her weathered hand finding mine. You want to talk about selfishness? Let's talk about calling a child a failure so many times she starts to believe it. Let's talk about dismissing every achievement because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. Let's talk about loving your children only when they make you look good to your friends. You always favored her, my mother accused. Always took her side. Someone had to. Ruth shot back. Did you know she called me crying after last Christmas? Not because she'd failed at something, but because she'd just closed her Series A funding round for $10 million and had no one to celebrate with. Her own family had made her feel so worthless that she couldn't even share her joy without fear of being mocked. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. $10 million. Series A funding. The terminology of real success, not the fantasy they'd accused me of living. She tried to tell you, Ruth continued relentlessly. Every single time. The weekend she incorporated, she called Helen to share the news. You told her incorporating was easy and anyone could do it. When she got her first 1,000 users, she tried to show Robert the growth charts. He said not to get too excited about internet points. When she hit her first million in revenue, she brought champagne to Sunday dinner. You assumed she'd gotten a bonus from some job she was lying about having. That's not... We didn't... My father stammered, but his protest died as the memories visibly surfaced in his eyes. The computer thing she was always working on, Ruth pressed on. That was her coding the platform from scratch, teaching herself programming languages you can't even pronounce. The failed blog that Claire loves to mention, it was called Style Mapping, and it was featured in TechCrunch. The crashed and burned online store, it pivoted into StyleSphere. Every failure you mocked was a lesson learned a step forward, but you were too busy comparing her to Brandon and Claire to notice. Lucas stepped forward, his phone in hand. I just looked up the patent filings. 27 patents. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Most successful tech companies are built on 1 or 2 innovations. Your daughter has 27 registered innovations in e-commerce technology. He scrolled through his screen. And these aren't simple patents. This is groundbreaking stuff. Machine learning applications for trend prediction, revolutionary inventory management systems, social commerce integration that Facebook tried to buy last year. Facebook tried to buy StyleSphere. Brandon's voice cracked. For $120 million, I confirmed quietly. I turned them down. The number sent another shockwave through the room. My mother sank into her chair. Claire's surgical hands trembled. Brandon looked like he'd been punched. But more importantly, Grandmother Ruth wasn't done. She never wanted your money, or your connections, or your approval to build this. She just wanted your love, your support. A family who believed in her even when the path wasn't clear. She looked at each of them in turn. And you couldn't even give her that. We were protecting her, my mother said weakly. The world is harsh. We didn't want her to get hurt chasing impossible dreams. No. Stephanie interjected from where she stood with her family. You were protecting yourselves from the possibility that the child you'd written off might actually prove you wrong. From having to admit that success doesn't only look like medical degrees and Goldman Sachs. From facing the fact that you're shallow people who only value achievement you can brag about at country clubs. "How dare you?" Claire started, but Stephanie cut her off. "I dare because I've seen it. 2 days of watching you systematically diminish someone who's achieved more than any of you. Do you know how many people would kill to have a daughter like Delia, who built something from nothing, who changed an entire industry, who did it all while being told she was worthless by the people who should have been her biggest cheerleaders? And now you want to profit from it," her father added with disgust. "Already planning your positions, your salaries, your benefits. Not one of you has asked Delia what she needs or wants. Not one of you has apologized for years of cruelty. You just want to feed off her success like parasites." The Chen's condemnations seemed to break something in Brandon. He turned on me with vicious fury. "This is all your fault. Everything was perfect until you had to show off. You couldn't let me have one thing, one moment of happiness without making it about you." I sat silently while being insulted. I reminded him. "I was folding napkins and arranging place cards. Stephanie's the one who revealed the truth. Because you manipulated her. You've been planning this, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate us all. You built your company in secret just so you could spring it on us and make us look bad. What kind of person does that to their own family? The kind of person whose family gave her no other choice," I said simply. "Every time I tried to share my progress, you shot me down. Every milestone I reached, you diminished. Every achievement I managed, you dismissed. So yes, I stopped trying. I built my success quietly without your input, or your mockery, or your realistic expectations. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made." "You're a liar and a snake," Claire spat. "Hiding your success just to make us look bad. A decent person would have found a way to make us understand. A good daughter would have tried harder." Tried harder. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I sent you articles about my company. You never read them. I offered to explain the technology. You said it was too complicated and probably wouldn't work anyway. I invited you to the launch party. You said you were busy and it was probably just another false start. How much harder should I have tried? How many more times should I have subjected myself to your dismissal and mockery? We're your family," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "Family forgives. Family comes together. Family supports each other." "Really?" I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to a saved folder. "Let me read you some family support. Text from Mom. March 15th, saw Patricia's daughter got promoted. When will you have good news to share? Email from Claire, June 2nd, can't make your launch thing. Real jobs don't have time for startup parties. Message from Brandon, August 20th. Stop pretending your website is a real company. It's embarrassing. Should I continue? I have 3 years worth." The evidence of their cruelty preserved in digital amber hung heavy in the room. But still, they tried to rewrite history. "Those were taken out of context," Brandon protested. "We were showing tough love, trying to keep you grounded. Grounded in what? Misery, self-doubt. The belief that I'm worthless without your approval." I shook my head. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your own egos. The family hierarchy where Brandon was the successful son, Claire was the brilliant daughter, and I was the cautionary tale you told your friends' children. Don't end up like Aunt Delia, floating from failure to failure. You've poisoned everyone against us." My mother accused, tears streaming down her face. "Turned the Chens against us. Ruined Brandon's engagement. Destroyed our family. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" "What I wanted," I said slowly, clearly, with the weight of years behind each word, "was a family who loved me, whether I succeeded or failed. What I wanted was parents who saw my potential even when I couldn't see it myself. What I wanted was siblings who celebrated my wins instead of seeing them as threats to their own importance. What I wanted was to share my journey with people who cared about me, not just my achievements. But that was never on offer, was it? Your love always came with performance reviews, So you decided to humiliate us instead, Claire said coldly. To wait until we had important guests to reveal your success and make us all look like fools. You planned this whole thing. I planned nothing. I came here hoping, as I always do, that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time you'd ask about my life with genuine interest. Maybe this time you'd listen when I tried to share something important. Instead, I got the same treatment as always. Dismissal, mockery, exclusion. The only difference is that this time someone else saw it happening and couldn't stay silent. Stephanie stepped forward again, her voice firm. I want to be very clear about something. Delia didn't ruin my engagement. You did. All of you. By showing me exactly what kind of family I'd be marrying into. What kind of values would be passed to my children. What kind of conditional love would surround them. I'm grateful to Delia for simply existing and letting me see the truth. Brandon's nothing like us, my mother pleaded desperately. He's different. He's kind and supportive, and he sat there while you emotionally abused his sister, Stephanie said flatly. He joined in the mockery. He contributed his own dismissive comments. He's exactly like you, just with a better suit and a fancier job title. And I refuse to become part of a family that measures worth in achievements and bank balances instead of character and kindness. The room fell into devastated silence. Brandon slumped in his chair, the ring box sitting between the remnants of dessert like a monument to what might have been. Claire's face had hardened into a mask of cold fury. My parents looked older. Suddenly, their carefully maintained facades cracking under the weight of exposed truth. And still, even in the face of all this evidence, all this testimony to their cruelty, they found a way to make me the villain. Look what you've done, my father said quietly, his banker's voice carrying the same dismissive tone I'd heard all my life. Look at the destruction you've caused. Your brother's lost his fiancée. Your mother's reputation is ruined. The family is in shambles. I hope you're satisfied. I looked around the dining room at the wreckage of what had once been a family meal. The elaborate centerpiece my mother had fussed over was wilting. The carefully arranged place cards were scattered. The napkins I'd folded with such precision were crumpled and wine-stained. It was a perfect metaphor for the Morrison family itself, all surface beauty, no structural integrity. Satisfied. I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. No, Dad. I'm not satisfied. I'm heartbroken. I'm exhausted. I'm done. I picked up my phone, my keys, my coat movements deliberate and final. I'm done trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I'm done dimming my light so you can feel brighter. I'm done being the family failure just because my success doesn't look like yours. Where are you going? My mother demanded. We're not finished here. We need to discuss how to move forward. The family needs to present a united front. We can't have people talking. People are already talking, Mom. They have been for years. About your successful doctor daughter and your investment banker son. And your other daughter, the one you skip over at parties. The one you apologize for, the one whose chair might as well be empty because that's how you treat me anyway. I turned to face them all one last time. I built something incredible. Not in spite of you, but because of you. Every dismissal became motivation. Every mockery became fuel. Every realistic expectation became a challenge to exceed. So, in a twisted way, I should thank you. Your cruelty taught me to rely on myself. Your conditional love taught me to seek validation internally. Your constant comparisons taught me that the only competition that matters is with yesterday's version of myself. Grandmother Ruth squeezed my hand. Tell them the rest, sweetheart. Tell them what they've really lost. I smiled sadly at the woman who'd been my only safe harbor. I'm moving to San Francisco permanently. I bought a house there 6 months ago. 4 bedrooms, a view of the bay walking distance from my office. I was going to invite you all for Christmas. Show you my life. Introduce you to my team, my friends, the family I've built from people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. But now, I shrugged. Now I understand that you can't share joy with people who resent your happiness. You can't just leave, Brandon said, desperation creeping into his voice. We're family. We need to work this out. The family needs. What you need, Lucas interrupted, is to take a long, hard look at yourselves. I've known your sister for exactly 2 days, and I can already see she's brilliant kind and incredibly resilient to have survived this toxic environment. The fact that you can't see that even now says everything about who you are as people. Mr. Chen stepped forward, reaching into his jacket pocket. Delia, I know this isn't the time or place, but I can't leave without saying this. I've been following StyleSphere's growth for 2 years. Your approach to democratizing fashion retail, your innovative use of AI for trend prediction, your commitment to supporting independent designers, it's everything the industry needs. He handed me his business card. When you're ready, I'd love to discuss potential partnerships. Real partnerships based on mutual respect and shared vision. Not whatever. He gestured dismissively at my family. This is. Thank you, I said, pocketing the card. I'll be in touch. Stephanie approached me last, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry I couldn't save you years of this. Sorry I was almost part of it. But mostly sorry that you had to build your dreams alone when you should have had an army of support behind you. You stood up for me, I said simply. That's more than most people have done. It's the least anyone should do, she replied firmly. Then louder for the room to hear. Brandon, I'll have someone pick up my things tomorrow. The engagement's off. Permanently. I've seen how this family treats success and failure, and I want no part of it. As I headed for the door, my mother made one last desperate attempt. Delia Morrison, if you walk out that door, you're no longer welcome in this house. You're no longer part of this family. I paused in the doorway, looking back at the people who shared my blood, but had never truly shared my life. I haven't been part of this family for years, Mom. You made sure of that every time you introduced me as your disappointment, every time you changed the subject when someone asked about me, every time you loved Brandon and Claire for their achievements while merely tolerating my existence. I'm not losing a family today. I'm finally admitting I never had one. 6 months later, I stood in my San Francisco office looking out at the bay while my assistant briefed me on the day's schedule. StyleSphere had just announced our Series B funding, $75 million led by Chen Ventures, with Lucas Chen joining our board. We'd been featured on the Forbes cover with the headline, "The Anonymous Billionaire: How Delia Morrison Built Fashion's Future in Silence." My family had tried to capitalize on the publicity. My mother gave an interview to the local paper claiming she'd always supported my entrepreneurial spirit. Claire posted on LinkedIn about how growing up with a visionary sister had inspired her own innovations. Brandon left Goldman Sachs and started telling people he was taking a sabbatical to consult for the family business. They'd rewritten history so thoroughly that sometimes I wondered if they actually believed their new version of events. But I'd learned to let go of their narrative. In therapy, Dr. Martinez helped me understand that their inability to love me unconditionally said nothing about my worth and everything about their limitations. I processed the grief of losing the family I'd wished for while celebrating the family I'd chosen. That family gathered in my home for Thanksgiving this year. Grandmother Ruth had moved to a senior community in Berkeley to be closer to me. Stephanie, who'd become one of my closest friends, brought her new boyfriend a teacher who valued kindness over stock options. Lucas and his team, who'd become like siblings to me, filled my dining room with laughter. My employees, many of whom had also escaped toxic families, brought dishes from their cultures, creating a feast that was richer for its diversity. As we went around the table sharing gratitudes, no one was skipped. No one was dismissed. No one's achievement was weighed against another's. We celebrated Marcus's promotion and Lena's new baby with equal joy. We supported Kenji through his divorce and celebrated Sarah's decision to go back to school. Success wasn't measured in dollars or degrees, but in growth and courage in showing up for each other. I'm grateful, I said when it was my turn, for learning that family isn't about blood, It's about who shows up when you're struggling, who celebrates your wins without jealousy, who sees your potential even when you're folding napkins, who loves you not for what you achieve, but for who you are. I'm grateful I found all of you. The Forbes article had asked me about my unusual decision to build StyleSphere anonymously. I'd told them it was strategic about letting the product speak for itself. But the truth was more complex. When you grow up being told you're a failure, success feels dangerous. It took me years to realize I'd been hiding not from the world, but from my family's inability to celebrate me. Now, as messages poured in from young entrepreneurs who'd read my story and felt inspired, I realized my family had given me an unexpected gift. Their cruelty had taught me compassion. Their conditions had taught me to love unconditionally. Their dismissal had taught me to see the overlooked and underestimated. Every feature of StyleSphere that supported unknown designers, every policy that gave chances to unconventional candidates, every decision to value potential over pedigree grew from the soil of my own pain. The saddest part, I would have shared everything with them freely. The success, the wealth, the connections, the joy. All they had to do was love me for who I was not, what I could do for them. But they couldn't see past their own narrow definitions of worth to recognize the daughter who'd been worthy all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Saw the Forbes article. We should talk about that CFO position. Family first, right? I deleted it without responding. Some bridges once burned light the way forward. Later that evening, as my chosen family laughed and talked and filled my home with warmth, Stephanie raised her glass. To Delia, she said, who taught us that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right, and that the sweetest success is the kind you don't need anyone else to validate. As we toasted, I thought about that Thanksgiving 2 years ago when I'd folded napkins in silence while my family planned a future that didn't include me. They'd been right about one thing: I wasn't like them. And thank God for that. Looking back now, I realize that every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment of being overlooked was actually redirecting me towards something better. My family thought they were breaking me down, but they were actually clearing the path for me to build myself up. Without their support, I learned to support myself. Without their belief, I learned to believe in myself. Without their love, I learned to love myself. And that more than any company valuation or Forbes feature is my greatest success. To anyone watching who's ever been told you're not enough, who's been skipped over at your own family's table, who's building dreams while being called delusional, remember this: your worth isn't determined by their recognition. Your success isn't measured by their standards. Your family isn't limited to those who share your DNA. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is showing you exactly who they are, so you can choose to become everything they're not. So here's my question for you. What dream are you building in silence because the people who should support you don't believe in you? Share in the comments below. Let's create the supportive community our families couldn't be. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over family trauma. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't dependent on their family's approval. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to succeed. You just need the courage to begin. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the best revenge truly is a life well lived, surrounded by people who loved you before you proved them wrong.